The worst decisions happen at 2 a.m., when you're desperate enough to ignore your own survival instinct. I'd been running the underground translation network in the city for 3 years. Languages were my oxygen, my armor, my escape route from everything ordinary. Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Italian, Portuguese. I collected dialects the way other people collected debts. The pay was excellent. The consequences were things I preferred not to think about. That night, I was translating documents in the basement of Rossini's, a wine bar that pretended to be legitimate but smelled like gunpowder and desperation. The owner, Marco, had hired me on a cash-only basis. No contracts, no questions. The folder on the mahogany desk in front of me contained contracts I shouldn't be reading, shipping routes, names, amounts that made my stomach twist into knots. "Faster," Marco said, his voice thin and anxious. He'd been pacing for 20 minutes, his Ferragamo shoes clicking against marble like a countdown timer. "He needs it by 3. "Who's he?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Everyone in this city knew the answer. There was only one person important enough to make Marco sweat through his silk shirt: Dante Rossi. The name alone changed the air pressure in the room. Even underground, in a basement lit by amber wine bottles and the glow of my laptop, speaking his name felt like drawing a gun in a library. "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to," Marco whispered. And I heard the real fear now, not the performance of fear, but the bone-deep kind that came from knowing you were standing at the edge of a cliff and the wind was picking up. I kept translating. The documents were Sicilian to English, and my hands moved faster, muscle memory overriding my better judgment. I'd done this dozens of times. Translate, get paid, forget what I'd read. It was a good system, safe, until it wasn't. The basement lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they steadied. But something had shifted. The air felt thicker, charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the building's ancient wiring. "He's here," Marco breathed, and I watched his face drain of color. I should have left then. I should have uploaded the files, taken my money, and walked out into the rain-soaked Naples streets without looking back. Instead, I kept my eyes on the screen, translating the final paragraph with meticulous focus, a pointless act of defiance against the thing I couldn't control. The basement door opened. Footsteps descended, not rushed, not tentative. Each step was deliberate, possessive, as if the person walking owned the darkness itself. 2 bodyguards flanked him. Massive men who looked like they'd been carved from marble by someone with anger issues. But I barely registered them. My eyes found him, and every translation skill I possessed, every language, every dialect, every ability to read subtext and intention abandoned me completely. He was tall. That was the first thing. 6'3" at minimum, broad-shouldered in a way that suggested he'd learned violence early and perfected it over time. Dark suit, tailored to his frame like it had been stitched into his skin. Black shirt, no tie. His hair was jet black, slightly longer on top, styled in a way that was deliberately careless. The kind of careless that took 40 minutes in front of a mirror. But it was his eyes that broke something inside me. They were gray, storm gray, the kind of gray that shouldn't exist in human beings, that belonged to wolves in winter and things that hunted in the dark. When those eyes found mine, they didn't sweep past me. They locked and held. The air between us seemed to compress, to fold inward on itself. Every nerve ending in my body fired at once, a symphony of danger and something else, something older, something that lived in the part of my brain that still remembered being animal. "Dante," Marco said, and I'd never heard my name sound so small. "Your translations. She's just finished I can see what she's finished." His voice was low, rough, textured like gravel and expensive whiskey. It hit my ears and traveled down my spine, leaving heat in its wake. He moved toward the desk, and I did something incredibly stupid. I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't do anything to acknowledge the fact that the most dangerous man in the city was now close enough that I could smell him leather, smoke, and something underneath that was purely him, something that made my body recognize him as threat and sanctuary in the same breath. "You speak Italian," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." My voice came out steady, which felt like a small miracle. "Also Arabic, Mandarin, Portuguese, Russian, and German." He stopped walking. I watched him process this, watched something flicker across his face. Amusement, maybe, or recognition. 5 languages, he said, and still foolish enough to translate documents you shouldn't be able to read. That's interesting. "I need the money," I said flatly. "I don't need your approval for my choices." The bodyguards shifted. I could feel their hands moving toward the guns I knew they carried with the same certainty I knew the sun would rise tomorrow. But Dante lifted one hand, a gesture so small it barely qualified as movement, and they froze. He was still looking at me, still holding my eyes with those impossible gray ones. "What's your name?" "Vittoria," I said. It was the truth, at least. It was the name I used when I wanted people to know who I actually was. Vittoria Moretti. Something changed in his expression. A tightening around his eyes. A slight compression of his jaw. "Moretti," he repeated. And there was something dangerous in the way he said it. Something that went deeper than surface reaction. "You're related to the Morettis?" "Not anymore," I said. Which was technically true and also completely misleading. I changed my last name for the translation work. Less complicated. He moved closer. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that my own body was responding in ways I had no control over. My pulse accelerating. My breath coming shallow. Every cell in me suddenly. Desperately aware of his proximity. "You're lying," he said. But there was no anger in it. There was something almost like curiosity. The way a predator might be curious about prey that didn't run. "I'm translating for money," I countered. "Not telling you my life story." "And yet," he said, reaching down to touch the file folder on the desk with one finger. "Your story is exactly what Marco hired you not to have, which means either Marco is an idiot, or someone who knew who you were sent you here." My heart stopped. Actually stopped. Like my body had decided that beating was a luxury it could no longer afford. "I don't know what you... liar," he said again. And this time he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of something that had decided to play with its food. And a good one. "Let me explain something to you, Vittoria Moretti. Information is blood in my world. And you just walked into a room with it running down your hands, having no idea which family it belongs to or why they sent you." He leaned down then, close enough that his lips nearly brushed my ear. "That makes you either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I'm still deciding which." The basement door upstairs slammed open. Shouting. Chaos. The unmistakable sound of gunfire controlled. Professional. The kind that meant organized violence rather than panic. Dante's entire body went rigid, every muscle tightening like a coiled spring. His hand moved to his jacket, and I caught the glint of metal, a gun that looked like an extension of his body. "Stay here," he commanded, and his voice had changed. This wasn't the curious predator anymore. This was something exponentially more dangerous. This was a man accustomed to killing before asking questions. "What's happening?" Marco's voice cracked. "Your rival family just made a very expensive mistake," Dante said, already moving toward the stairs. "They thought tonight was the night to take what's mine." He paused at the bottom of the staircase, turning back to look at me one last time. "And you, Vittoria Moretti, are going to stay exactly where I can see you. Because if you run, I'll assume you knew about this. And if you're running from your own family, well," he climbed the first step, "then you've just put yourself in the most dangerous position in this city, under my protection." The gunfire intensified above us. The lights flickered again. And in that moment of darkness, I heard him say something so quietly I almost missed it. "Bloodline traitors always find each other in the dark." Then he was gone, disappearing up the stairs into chaos, leaving me alone in the basement with the documents and the terrible realization that I'd just become a pawn in a game I didn't know I was playing. And worse, I could still smell him on my skin. The basement became my cage for the next 6 hours. Dante's bodyguard stayed with me while the violence happened above muffled gunshots, shouting, the sound of breaking glass and furniture destroying itself against walls. I sat at the mahogany desk, hands folded, trying to remain invisible while my mind spiraled through every possible interpretation of what he'd said. Bloodline traitors always find each other in the dark. I didn't want to examine what that meant. I'd spent 5 years running from my family, the Moretti name, the legacy of organized crime, the weight of expectations that came with being born into a dynasty of violence. My father had wanted me to marry into another family's power structure. My uncle had wanted to use my languages to expand their empire into new territories. My mother had wanted me to be someone other than who I was. So I'd left, changed my name to Russo, became a ghost, took translations work that paid well enough to live independently, which happened to include work for people who operated in the shadows. I had not expected the shadows to have a name like Dante Rossi, or eyes like a winter storm, or the ability to make my entire nervous system respond to his presence like I was some kind of homing pigeon designed specifically for him. Around 5 a.m., he came back down the stairs. He was alone this time, and there was blood on his hands. Not much, just enough to tell me he'd done the killing himself rather than directing it from a safe distance. There was something almost honest about that, the way he didn't hide the blood or wash it away before coming to see me. He looked at me for a long moment, and I watched his jaw clench, watched his hands open and close like he was fighting some internal battle about what he wanted to do with them. "The documents," he said finally. "Translated. Uploaded to the secured server Marco gave me the access code for. And you didn't read them." It wasn't a question, but it was also clearly a test. I decided on honesty, because lying to someone who just killed people seemed like an unnecessary risk. "I read them," I admitted. "I'm a translator. Reading is part of the job. You can fire the people who hired me, but I'm not going to pretend I'm illiterate." Something flickered across his face again, that same amusement from before. But it was different now, warmer, like he was genuinely delighted by my defiance. He pulled out a chair and sat down, right across from me, close enough that the air between us started to feel like it was vibrating. "What did you read?" he asked. "Sicilian shipping routes, dates, names, amounts that suggest you're moving something through the port that the authorities wouldn't appreciate if they found out about it. Something worth enough to fight over at 2 a.m. in the middle of a wine bar basement." I met his eyes. "I would guess drugs, but you have the kind of money that suggests you deal in something more profitable. Maybe weapons, maybe information." I didn't get far enough to know for sure. "And you're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," I corrected. "But I learned a long time ago that fear and honesty don't have to be mutually exclusive." He reached across the table and took my hand. Not gently. His grip was firm, possessive, and the moment his skin touched mine, something electric sparked between us, a sensation so intense that I had to consciously remember to breathe. "Say your full name again," he said quietly. "Vittoria Russo." "No." He leaned closer. "Your real name." I should have pulled my hand away. Should have lied. Should have done literally anything except what I actually did, which was let him see the truth in my eyes. "Vittoria Moretti," I whispered. His grip tightened, and I heard him exhale something that sounded like relief mixed with rage. "Dante Rossi and Vittoria Moretti," he said, like he was testing the sound of our names together. "Two things are true right now. First, your family, or what's left of it, is probably looking for you. And they're going to know you were here because Marco's already talking, because he's terrified of me and even more terrified of them. Second, you can't leave this city without my protection, because the moment you step outside, you're either prey or a bargaining chip, depending on which family gets to you first. And you're offering yourself as the alternative," I said, understanding where this was going. "I'm offering myself as inevitability," he corrected, and there was something almost sad in his voice now, something that suggested he understood the darkness of what he was about to ask me to accept. "You're going to stay with me. You're going to work for me, translating things you shouldn't see. And you're going to do it because the alternative is probably death." "That's not really an offer. That's a threat." "Yes," he agreed. "But at least it's an honest threat from someone who won't pretend to be anything other than what he is. Can you say the same about your own family?" He had a point, which was infuriating. "How long?" I asked. "Until it's safe." "That could be never." "Then I guess you'd better get used to seeing me every single day," he said, and released my hand but didn't move away. "We're connected now, Vittoria. Your bloodline, my empire. The moment you walked into this basement, the moment I saw your face and heard your name, something chose us for each other." "I don't believe in fate," I said. "You will," he promised. "Once you understand what your family was hiding from you. Once you understand what I've been hiding from mine. And once you realize that the pull you feel toward me isn't attraction, it's recognition. It's something much older than either of us. And if I refuse?" He smiled that dangerous smile again, and this time I understood it wasn't cruelty. It was sadness. "You can't refuse," he said softly. "Neither of us can. Some bonds aren't broken by will or distance or even death. They're written in blood, and they choose their own timing." The basement door opened again, and this time Marco appeared disheveled, pale, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in one night. "Dante," he said urgently. "We need to move. The police are coming." Dante stood, extending his hand to me. "With me or against me, Vittoria? Choose." I looked at his hand. I looked at his face. I looked at the exit behind him that led back to a world that was crumbling and a family that had only ever wanted to use me. I took his hand. His penthouse was on the 47th floor of a building that probably wasn't on any official city maps. We arrived by car, a midnight black Rolls-Royce that seemed to absorb the early morning light, and took a private elevator that required both a keycard and a biometric scan. Dante didn't speak during the drive or the ascent. He simply held my hand, his thumb tracing slow circles on my wrist, in a gesture that was almost tender. If you ignored the fact that we'd just fled a crime scene, And I was now what? His prisoner? His employee? His something else entirely? The penthouse was exactly what you'd expect from a man who'd built an empire on controlled violence and strategic chaos. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the coastline visible in the distance where the Mediterranean caught the rising sun. The aesthetic was modern luxury, leather, steel, glass, but there were touches that suggested something deeper. A library with books in at least 15 languages, a study with vintage maps on the walls, photographs that I realized, as I looked closer, were all from decades ago. Images of the Rossi family when they were building their power, and one photograph, framed in silver, that made me stop breathing. It was a man who looked almost identical to Dante, except older, and with softer eyes. Standing next to him was a woman with dark hair and a familiar expression, the same defiant tilt of the chin that I'd inherited. Behind them both stood a young girl, maybe 6 years old, with curly hair and a smile that looked like joy itself. "That's my father," Dante said quietly, appearing beside me without a sound. "Tommaso Rossi, dead for 15 years, killed in a territorial dispute. My mother followed him 3 months later. Grief, the doctors called it. I called it her way of making a statement, refusing to live in a world without him." "And the girl?" I asked, though some part of me already knew the answer. "My sister, Lucia. She was 7 when my parents died. I was 19. And I became," he paused, searching for the word, "responsible. For the family, for the empire, for all the violence that came with it." He moved away from the photograph, and I realized he was in pain. The kind of pain that doesn't announce itself loudly, but settles into your bones and never quite leaves. "You need to rest," he said. Shifting into practicality. "There's a guest room on the east side. Clothes in your size should already be there. I had someone bring things from your apartment while we were dealing with the situation at Rossini's." "You sent someone to my apartment," I repeated slowly. "Obviously. You think I'd let you run if I lost sight of you for 5 seconds?" He was moving through the penthouse now, checking locks, looking at security monitors that showed feeds from dozens of cameras. "Your apartment is being watched, by my people and by agents working for at least 2 other families. Everyone wants leverage, Vittoria. And right now, you're leverage for everyone. Except you," I said. He turned to look at me, and there was something raw in his expression, something that looked dangerously close to vulnerability. "No," he agreed. "You're not leverage for me. I'm not entirely sure what you are for me yet, but leverage isn't even close to what you are." I should have been terrified. Instead, I was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. I followed him to the guest room, where he was. Right there were clothes in my size, toiletries, everything I might need. It was like he'd erased my independent existence and replaced it with a curated version he'd designed. "There are security cameras in every room except the bathroom," he said matter-of-factly. "And there's someone stationed outside your door at all times. Not to hurt you, to protect you. There's a difference. I'm not supposed to try to leave." "You're free to try," he said. "But you won't make it past the elevator. And when my people bring you back, because they will bring you back, it will be because they're following my orders, not because they want to hurt you. Context matters." I sank down onto the bed, and he sat beside me, not touching but close enough that I could feel the warmth from his body. "What did you mean?" I asked. "About bloodlines. About us being chosen for each other." He was silent for a long time, and I watched his jaw work like he was grinding through something difficult. Finally, he spoke. "Your family and mine have a history that goes back generations. Not rivalry, something older. Something that the families don't talk about in public because it sounds insane if you don't understand the framework." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "There are bloodlines in this city that have connections to things that most people would consider mythology. My family kept records, journals. Your family apparently did the same thing, because they recognized something in me when I became the Rossi boss that made them deeply uncomfortable." "That's insane," I said flatly. "Yes," he agreed. "But you felt it too. The moment I walked into that basement, you felt it. Your body recognized mine before your mind caught up." He was right, and I hated that he was right. And I hated even more that I couldn't deny it without lying to both of us. "I need to sleep," I said abruptly. "Before I figure out if I'm having a mental breakdown or if you're actually as dangerous as you seem." "I'm worse," he said, standing. "But not to you." "At the door." He paused. "When you wake up, we'll talk about what your family was really hiding. What they were protecting you from by keeping you isolated. What it means that your bloodline carries the same mark as mine." "And what mark is that?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. He came back to the bed and took my hand, pressing it against his chest. Under the black shirt, I could feel his heartbeat, fast and powerful and real. "The mark of something that's supposed to be extinct," he said quietly. "And the curse that comes with it. But we can talk about that when you're not falling asleep. Rest, Vittoria. Tomorrow your entire understanding of what you are changes." He left, closing the door behind him, and I was alone in a bed that was too comfortable and a room that was too beautiful and a situation that was far too dangerous. I fell asleep without meaning to, and I dreamed of gray eyes and ancient bloodlines and a voice that sounded like destiny saying my name in the dark. I woke to the sound of Dante arguing with someone in Italian. The conversation was coming from somewhere outside my room, and I could make out just enough to understand that whoever he was talking to was expressing serious doubts about keeping the Moretti girl around and compromising security. I checked my phone, which had appeared on the nightstand while I slept, fully charged and apparently monitored, and saw it was 2 p.m. I'd slept for 8 hours. I took a shower, put on clothes from the wardrobe someone had curated for me. All black, all expensive, all cut to emphasize the kind of sleek danger that seemed appropriate for the situation, and went looking for Dante. I found him in the study, on a leather sofa with a laptop open, his black shirt sleeves rolled up to the elbows. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were sharp, but there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of stress and exhaustion. "Vittoria," he said, closing the laptop immediately. "You're awake. I was about to have someone bring you food." "I heard you arguing," I said, sitting down across from him instead of beside him. Some part of me needed that distance, needed to establish that I wasn't completely under his control, even if we both knew the truth was more complicated. "Internal politics," he said dismissively. "Nothing that concerns you." "It sounds like I'm the problem," I said. "That my being here is causing complications." He sighed, and it was the sigh of someone who'd decided to stop lying. "You are causing complications," he admitted. "My consigliere, my closest advisor, thinks you're a plant. That your family sent you specifically to compromise my security. That your presence here is a weakness, not an asset." "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think your family doesn't know you're here. I think they're panicking because you disappeared on the same night we had a conflict with a rival family. And I think my consigliere has forgotten that sometimes trust isn't about logic, it's about instinct. And your instinct says I'm not a plant. My instinct says you're going to be the most important person in my life, whether either of us wanted that or not," he said. And there was something almost angry about it, like he was frustrated with himself for feeling something he couldn't control. Which is a problem because it makes me weak. And weak is something I can't afford to be. "So what are you going to do?" I asked. "Prove your consigliere, right?" "No." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. "I'm going to prove to him that you're more valuable alive and loyal than you ever could be as a spy. And for that, you need to understand what you are, what your bloodline carries, why you're going to be an asset to this family instead of a liability." He turned to face me, and his expression was serious in a way that suggested we were moving into dangerous territory. "Tell me about your dreams," he said. "What?" "Your dreams. You had them, didn't you? Before you ran from your family. Visions of things that hadn't happened yet. Moments where you could see just outside the edge of your own life." My stomach dropped. "How did you—" "Because I have them too," he said quietly. "And my mother had them. And my father. And if the records are correct, your grandmother had them. They run in our bloodlines, Vittoria. We're part of something older than organized crime. Older than this city. Older than modern understanding of what's possible." "You're talking about magic," I said flatly. "I'm talking about genetics, mixed with ritual, and something that probably should have died out centuries ago but didn't because our families were arrogant enough to preserve it," he corrected. "My family kept records, journals going back to the 1600s. People in our bloodline don't just have premonitions, Vittoria. They shape reality, slightly, subtly, but measurably. And you believe this. I believe it because I've used it. I've stood in rooms with men who were planning to kill me, and I've seen the moment 2 seconds before it happens. And I've moved, and they've died instead. I've closed deals that should have fallen apart because I could see the weakness in their position that they couldn't see themselves. I've built an empire partially on crime, and partially on something that most people would call witchcraft." He sat back down beside me, close enough to touch, but not touching. "And you have it too. It's in your blood. When you were translating those documents, you weren't just translating words. You were reading the intention behind the words. You were seeing what people meant to say before they said it. That's why you're such an exceptional translator. That's why you could sense when Marco was lying about who he was meeting with that night. That's why the moment I walked into that basement, Your body recognized something that went deeper than physical attraction. This is insane, I whispered. Yes, he agreed. But it's also true, and it's why my consigliere is terrified of you. Because if you have this ability, and you're trained, and you're loyal to this family, you could become something exponentially more dangerous than any typical translator, or any typical enforcer. And if I'm not loyal? I asked carefully. His expression hardened. Then you're a threat that needs to be neutralized. And I won't be the one to do it, but someone in this family will. Because we don't keep living threats around us, Vittoria. We can't afford to. There it was, the fracture in the trust. The moment where I understood that his feelings for me, whatever they were, existed in direct conflict with his survival instinct. He could care about me and still kill me if I became dangerous. Those two things could coexist in him without contradiction. So what you're saying is, I'm saying that I need you to prove to me and to my family that the loyalty is real. Not forced, not circumstantial, real. How am I supposed to prove that? I asked. By helping me, he said. By using the gifts in your blood to help me strengthen this family instead of working against it. By understanding that the pull you feel toward me isn't just chemistry, it's a bloodline calling to another bloodline. And by accepting that whether you wanted this or not, whether you believe in fate or not, you're now mine. The word mine hung between us like a physical thing. Possessive, dangerous, impossible to argue against because it was already true. And if I can't do that? I asked quietly. He reached out, and his hand found my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with surprising gentleness. Then I'll have to hurt you, he said. And there was genuine sorrow in his voice. And neither of us wants that. He leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't tender. It wasn't the kind of kiss that belonged in romance novels. It was a kiss that tasted like a threat and a promise and an apology all at once. It was a kiss that said, I will destroy you, but not before I make sure you're the one destroying me first. When he pulled away, I was shaking. Rest, he said, standing. Tomorrow we start your training. By the time my family council meets next week, you're going to help me prove that you're exactly what we need. He walked to the door, then paused without turning around. And Vittoria, don't try to run tonight. I won't chase you, but I also won't forgive it. Some things, once broken, stay broken. He left, and I was alone with the realization that I'd just been both claimed and threatened by the same man, in the same breath. And the worst part was that I felt the truth in every word he'd said. The pull toward him wasn't fading. It was intensifying. Training with Dante was like learning a language that lived in your nervous system instead of your mouth. For 3 days, he taught me to listen to the space between words, to watch for the micro-expressions that revealed intention, to quiet my mind enough to hear what he called the signal, that whisper of premonition that ran through bloodlines like ours. We sat in his study, books spread around us like we were academics instead of criminals learning to weaponize supernatural ability. Here, he said, sliding a folder toward me. It contained photographs of men I'd never met, and security reports about some kind of trade agreement. Read it, but don't read the words. Read the why beneath them. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and let my instinct lead instead of my training, and it was like a fog lifted. I could see it not in my mind's eye, but somewhere deeper, in a part of myself that recognized patterns in chaos. There's a betrayal coming, I said, my voice steady even as my heart rate accelerated. The man in the first photograph, the one with the scar, he's planning to undercut you. But he's not working alone. Someone in your organization is feeding him information. Someone close. Dante's expression didn't change, but I heard his breathing shift. Who? He asked. I don't know yet. The signal isn't clear enough. But it's someone you trust. He sat back, and I watched him process this. Watched the moment when trust and vulnerability fought with ruthlessness and control. Watched ruthlessness win. Good, he said finally. This is exactly what I need you to do. By the end of the week, I need you to identify the leak, and then I need you to figure out what we should do about it. What we should do, I repeated. You mean whether we should kill them? I mean whether we should kill them, exile them, turn them, or use them as misinformation, he said coldly. The method depends entirely on the person and the circumstance, and you want me to help choose someone's fate based on a supernatural instinct I've had for 3 days. I want you to be honest about what you see, he corrected. The rest is decision, and decision is my responsibility, not yours. But the problem was that I could already feel it, the weight of the signal, the knowledge that lives hung in the balance of what I could perceive. It was power, yes, but it was also a tremendous burden, and I was only beginning to understand the real cost of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on the balcony of my room, 47 stories above the city, and tried to make sense of what was happening to me. "Can't sleep either?" Dante's voice came from behind me, and I realized he'd been watching me through the glass. "Join the Insomniacs Club. The benefits are shit, but the company is occasionally interesting." I identified the leak, I said without turning around. "It's your security director, Luciano. He's been feeding information to the Corsini family for the past 6 months because they have his daughter. They kidnapped her when she was 14, and they've been holding her as leverage." "And how do you know this?" Dante asked, and there was something almost gentle in his voice, which was somehow worse than anger. "Because I tried to find out who was vulnerable, and he kept showing up. His grief, his desperation, his sense that he was trapped between two families. The signal is loudest when the motivation is strongest." Dante was silent for so long that I thought he might not answer. Then I heard him move, felt him stand beside me, close but not touching. "You're in pain," he observed. "He has a family," I said. "A wife. 3 other children." "If you kill him—" "I won't kill him," Dante interrupted. "I'll save his daughter. I'll extract her from the Corsini compound using intelligence we extract from Luciano, and then I'll let him choose. He can stay with his family and work for me, knowing that any betrayal will end in everyone he loves being killed. Or he can run. And I'll let him. And I'll place a price on his head that every family in this city will feel obligated to honor." "That's not mercy," I said. "No," he agreed, "but it's better than death. And in this world, Vittoria, that's the closest thing to mercy that exists." He reached over and took my hand. "This is the unraveling," he said quietly. "This is the moment where you understand that the world you came from wasn't just dangerous. It was fundamentally compromised. Every person you met, every relationship you had, everything was built on the foundation of violence and control. And now that you can see it, you can't unsee it. Everything that felt safe is suddenly transparent." "How do you live like this?" I whispered. "You don't," he said. "You survive like this. There's a difference. And you find the small things that make survival bearable. Coffee that's too strong. Books in languages you'll never fully understand. A person who sees you for exactly what you are and doesn't flinch away." He turned me to face him, and even in the darkness, I could see those impossible gray eyes. "That last one is rare, Vittoria. Rarer than anything else in this world. I don't know how to trust you," I said, even though part of me wants to so badly that it hurts. "Good," he said. "Trust without doubt is just faith, and faith has gotten more people killed than bullets have. Keep your doubt. Keep your skepticism. But understand that my interest in you isn't just about bloodlines or power. It's also about the fact that you're the only person in this entire city who makes me want to be something other than what I was built to be." He kissed me again, and this time it was different. This time there was tenderness underneath the possession. This time it tasted like vulnerability masquerading as control. "There's going to be a council meeting in 4 days," he said when he pulled away. "My entire family will be here. They'll test you, try to break your resolve, see if you're actually loyal or just a plant. And you're going to need to stand in front of them and prove that you belong here. What if I can't? Then they'll kill you, and I'll have to mourn you very publicly, so no one thinks your death was a weakness that others can exploit. You're really selling me on this whole family unit," I said dryly. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger and less like a predator and more like a man. "You'll survive it," he said with certainty. "Because underneath the fear and the doubt, you're exactly as ruthless as I am. You're just better at hiding it." He left me alone on the balcony, and I stood there watching the city lights until dawn, understanding with every passing moment that the person I used to be was dying. And the person I was becoming was terrifying, but not as terrifying as the fact that I was starting to want to become her anyway. The journals were kept in a vault beneath the penthouse. Dante took me down 3 flights of underground stairs, through security that required biometric scans and codes that changed daily, and into a room that looked like something from a museum, temperature-controlled, dust-sealed, and filled with books that looked like they'd survived centuries. "My great-great-grandfather started this collection in 1642, Dante said, running his fingers along the spines of ancient leather-bound volumes. "After he survived something that wasn't supposed to be survivable. An assassination attempt where 6 men stabbed him simultaneously, and he didn't die, didn't even bleed. That's not possible," I said. But even as I said it, I could feel the truth of it somewhere deep in my bones. The signal was quiet, but it was there, confirming what I already knew, that impossible things had happened to my bloodline. That the rules of normal biology didn't apply to people like us. "It is possible," Dante said, pulling down one of the older journals. It's just rare and specific. It happens to people like us, Vittoria. People with bloodlines that were touched by something ancient, something that European historians would have called witchcraft, something that ancient texts, if we're being more precise, call the marked. He opened the journal, and I saw pages filled with hand-drawn illustrations and observations, written in Italian so archaic it took me a moment to parse the meaning. These are medical notes, I said, starting to understand. Someone was documenting the marked, studying them. Not someone, Dante corrected. My ancestor was both marking and documenting. There was a ritual, performed in the 1600s, that identified people with what we'd now call latent supernatural ability, people whose bloodlines carried something that could be awakened and trained. Your family was there when it happened. So was mine. I looked at him, and something shifted in my understanding. The bloodline curse, I said slowly. That's not a curse. That's a ritual, Mark. That's what it means that you found me, that we found each other. That's the connection you were talking about. Now you're beginning to see, Dante said, and there was something almost sad in his voice. Your family knew what you were capable of. That's why they were so protective. That's why they wanted to keep you isolated and sheltered. They weren't trying to protect you from the world. They were trying to protect the world from you. He pulled out another journal, this one newer, written in modern Italian. This belonged to my father, he said. He wrote about his experiences with the gift, how it was beautiful and terrible, how it allowed him to protect his family, but also made him see things he couldn't unsee, how it eventually drove him to violence not because he was inherently violent, but because he could see all the ways that violence was about to happen to the people he loved, and he got tired of being reactive instead of proactive. He showed me a passage, and I read my father's name in the margins, a note that said, Mafia Moretti's daughter shows promise. Stronger signal than her father. Could be dangerous if trained by the wrong hands. Recommend continued isolation. They were afraid of me, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. They were terrified of you, Dante corrected, because they understood that you had the potential to become something that none of them could control. And your family, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Your family made some choices that went against the ethics of the marked. They tried to use the gift to expand their power in ways that went beyond the traditional limitations. What does that mean? It means they tried to bind your bloodline to theirs using a ritual that required the participation of someone with the marked gift, Dante said quietly. It didn't work. The person they tried to use it on, a girl from the Genovese family, died in the process. And the backlash killed half your father's inner circle. I felt sick. My father never mentioned. Because it was covered up, Dante said. The families decided collectively to bury it, to pretend it never happened. But your family was marked as unstable, as willing to break the old laws. And that's when they started isolating you, not to protect the world from you, but to isolate you from the world so that if you had to be executed for being too dangerous, you wouldn't already have a network of allies. You're telling me my family was planning to kill me, I said, my voice feeling very small. I'm telling you your family was terrified of you, and fear makes people capable of things they wouldn't normally consider. The journals my father kept show that he was advocating for your protection, that he disagreed with the collective decision to isolate you. Dante moved closer and took my face in his hands with surprising gentleness. And I need you to understand something, Vittoria. I don't want to isolate you. I don't want to control you or limit you. I want to train you. I want to teach you how to use what you are without destroying yourself in the process. And I want to stand beside you while you become someone powerful enough that no family in this city will ever dare to hunt you again. Why? I asked. Because I needed to understand his motivation. Needed to know if this was real or just manipulation. Because the signal between us isn't just bloodline connection, he said, his voice dropping lower. It's something more specific, more personal. My ancestors kept records of something called the twin mark, when two people from different families both carry the gift, and it's strong enough that they're drawn to each other, that they complete each other's abilities, that together they're exponentially more powerful than apart. He pressed his forehead against mine. That's what you are to me? Vittoria. You're my twin mark. And I've been waiting my entire life for you to exist. That's insane, I whispered. But I could feel it now, the truth of it, ringing through my entire body like a bell that had been struck. We just met. No, he said. We've been meeting for centuries. In different bodies, different lifetimes, different iterations of this city. And every time we're drawn to each other like gravity, and every time something gets in the way. But not this time. This time, I'm not going to let anything separate us. He pulled back and met my eyes, and I could see the honesty there, the desperation, the need that ran as deep as his ruthlessness. So here's what's going to happen, he said. In 2 days, my family council meets, and I'm going to tell them that you're my twin Mark, that you're not a weakness or a threat, but the foundation of something more powerful than we've ever been. And you're going to stand with me while I make that declaration, and you're going to let them see exactly what you're capable of. And if they don't accept it, then we burn this city to the ground together, he said simply. Because the choice between losing you and losing my family, that's not a choice. I would choose you. Every single time I would choose you. Every single time. He kissed me again, and this time it was a seal, a promise, a statement of intent so absolute that there was no coming back from it. When he pulled away, I was trembling, but not from fear. For the first time since I'd walked into Rossini's basement, I felt less like a prisoner, and more like I'd finally found the thing I didn't know I was missing. Let's go back upstairs, Dante said, taking my hand. The council meeting is in 2 days, and there's a lot to prepare. You're going to need to look absolutely perfect when you stand in front of my family and change the entire power structure of our organization. The council chamber was in the heart of the penthouse, a circular room with no windows, surrounded by 12 high-backed leather chairs arranged in a perfect circle. When I entered with Dante, all 12 were already filled. The Rossi family council. I recognized some of them from photographs in his study. His uncle Salvatore, his aunt Caterina, who ran international logistics, his cousin Marco, his consigliere, the one who thought I was a plant, and others older men who looked like they'd been carved from stone, women who wore their power like designer clothes. Dante held my hand and pulled me into the circle with him, and I felt every eye in the room focus on me with predatory intensity. Vittoria Moretti, Salvatore said, his voice rough as gravel. The Moretti name carries baggage in this city, particularly in our family, particularly in relation to your father's mistakes. I'm not here to answer for my father, I said, my voice steady despite the fact that my heart was trying to escape from my chest. I'm here because Dante wants me here, and I've chosen to stay. A criminal marrying into our family is one thing, Caterina said coldly. But a Moretti with unknown abilities? That's exponentially more dangerous. I'm not marrying into anything, I said. She's my twin Mark, Dante interrupted, and the room went completely silent. I felt the weight of the revelation like a physical blow. The twin Mark was apparently a big deal. I could see it in the way their expressions shifted from predatory to something more complicated. Fear, maybe, or respect. That's not possible, Marco said, his voice sharp. The twin Mark hasn't manifested in 2 centuries. The bloodlines don't. The bloodlines do, Dante said coldly. And it has manifested. Which means that Vittoria is now under the protection of this family. Which means that if anyone so much as thinks about her with hostile intent, they'll answer to me. Salvatore is right to be concerned. One of the older men said, a man I recognized from the journals as the Patriarch's Council representative. The Morettis betrayed the old laws. They attempted to bind bloodlines without consent. Their daughter could be carrying that same corruption. I'm not, I said, stepping forward. I was isolated from my family specifically to prevent me from being trained in whatever they were trying to do. I had no knowledge of their methods until yesterday, and I have no intention of repeating their mistakes. Easy to say, the Patriarch said. Harder to prove. Then test me, I said. Dante's hand tensed around mine, but he didn't stop me. Test her how? Caterina asked. Bring someone into this room who's trying to betray you, I said. Let me read them. Let me show you what I can do. Let me prove that I'm an asset, not a threat. There was a moment of silence, and then Salvatore smiled. I like her, he said. She has the same insanity that Dante has. This might work. They brought in Luciano, the security director who'd been feeding information to the Corsini family. He was pale, sweating, and the moment he saw me, I could feel the spike of his fear through the signal like touching a live wire. Vittoria, Dante said quietly, tell them what you see. I closed my eyes and let the signal flow through me, unfiltered and raw, and I could see it not just his guilt, but his entire story. His daughter in captivity, his impossible choice between family loyalty and family survival, his anguish at every decision he'd made. He's been feeding information to the Corsini family, I said, opening my eyes. But not by choice. They have his daughter. She was taken when she was 14 years old. She's been held in a compound in Palermo for 6 months. Every piece of information he gave them was an attempt to keep her alive, to have some leverage, to maybe buy time for rescue. I turned to Luciano, and I saw tears running down his face. You weren't trying to betray Dante, I said, and there was something almost kind in my voice. You were trying to save your daughter. You were a man caught between two families, and you chose your child. Which is human, which is understandable, which is exactly what anyone would have done. The council members exchanged glances, and I could feel the signal shift, their assessment of the situation changing with what I'd revealed. So what do we do with him? Salvatore asked, watching me carefully. You save his daughter, I said, meeting Dante's eyes. You extract her from Palermo using intelligence he provides voluntarily now that he's been caught. And then you give him a choice. Stay and be loyal to Dante, knowing that any future betrayal will cost his family everything. Or run, and accept the price on his head. But you let him choose, and you honor his choice, because that's the difference between us and people like his kidnappers. I turned to Luciano. Dante will save your daughter. That's not negotiable. It happens regardless of what you choose. But then the choice is yours. Stay and be useful, or run and be hunted. But your daughter survives. I can see that in the signal. She survives. Luciano fell to his knees, and I watched him break. Watched the weight of his impossible situation finally ease just slightly, because someone had offered him a path forward that didn't end in his child's death. Take him out, Salvatore said, and guards came and removed Luciano from the chamber. Well, Dante, your twin Mark seems to have impeccable judgment, for someone who should theoretically destroy everything around her. She doesn't, Dante said, and I could hear the certainty in his voice. She heals it. That remains to be seen, the patriarch said. But for now, we're satisfied that Vittoria Moretti is not an immediate threat to this family. Welcome to the Rossi organization, whether you wanted it or not. They dismissed us from the council chamber, and the moment we were in the corridor, I felt something break inside me. The adrenaline crashed, and I was shaking, and Dante caught me, pulled me against his chest. You were incredible, he whispered into my hair. I just made a decision for a man's life, I said, my voice breaking. I told his family to save his daughter, and I don't even know if that's possible. It's possible, Dante said, because I'm going to make it possible. And whatever else I am, I keep my promises. He lifted my face and kissed me, and for the first time, it felt like tenderness instead of possession, like devotion instead of control. Come with me, he said. He took me to his private study, locked the door, and pushed me against the wall gently, but with absolute command. And then he kissed me like he was trying to apologize for everything this world was going to cost me. Like he was trying to prepare me for the violence and the morality of compromise and the terrible beauty of power. His hands slid under my shirt, and I stopped thinking and started just feeling the heat of his body against mine, the pressure of his mouth, the certainty that whatever happened next, I was going to be transformed by it. I love you, he said, against my neck. I know it's insane. I know we just met. But I love you, Vittoria. I love the person you're becoming, and I loved the person you were before I knew you existed. And instead of pulling away, instead of protecting myself, I said it back. I love you too. And then his phone rang. The Corsini compound was hit, his consigliere Marco said, speaking low and fast. Not by us. Someone else got to them first. Someone professional. Military-grade weaponry. Precision execution. Dante went absolutely still, his hand still tangled in my hair. Luciano's daughter? He asked. Unharmed. She's in Italian custody now, which means either someone is trying to help us, or someone is trying to manipulate us. Either way, we have a problem. I felt Dante's entire body tense, felt the shift from lover to apex predator happen in the space of a heartbeat. Get the car, he said. We're leaving. Now. What's happening? I asked as he pulled away and started checking the gun I now knew was always within reach. Someone just made a very bold move, Dante said. They hit a Corsini compound without clearing it with anyone else in the city, which means they're either stupid, suicidal, or they don't care about the power structure. All three options are equally terrifying. We moved through the penthouse with practiced urgency, a team of bodyguards appearing like shadows, an armored car waiting in the underground garage, the city suddenly feeling less safe than it had moments before. The safe house was an apartment in the old quarter of the city, above a church that had been abandoned for decades. Luciano's daughter was there, a girl named Sofia, 14 years old with her father's eyes and a trauma that was going to follow her for the rest of her life. Luciano was holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Thank you, he kept saying to Dante. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dante said quietly. We need to figure out who hit that compound, because the moment we do, we need to either ally with them or eliminate them. There's no middle ground. I could feel it, the signal, stronger than it had ever been, pointing towards something I couldn't quite see. There was a pattern here, something that my marked bloodline was trying to show me, but the edges were fuzzy, like I was looking at something through frosted glass. "Dante," I said, pulling him into a corner. "The signal is trying to show me something, but I can't see it clearly. It's like someone is blocking me." His expression changed instantly from confident to genuinely concerned. "What do you mean, blocking you?" "Someone with the gift. Someone strong enough to obscure their intentions from me. Someone—" The window behind us exploded. I didn't hear the gunshot, which meant a silencer, but I heard Dante curse and pull me down. And I heard the bodyguards returning fire, and I heard chaos reorganize itself into deadly precision. "Get her out!" Dante was shouting, even as he moved toward the window, even as he was pulling his own weapon. "I'm not leaving you," I said, and I meant it with every cell in my body. "Vittoria, I need you alive more than I need to survive this moment. Move." One of his guards grabbed me, and I was being pulled toward the back stairs, and I could feel Dante's hand slip from mine, and I was screaming his name without making a sound because I was too busy realizing that the blocking force in my signal had just focused on him. We made it to the car, and I twisted around in my seat, trying to see through the dark windows, trying to use the signal to figure out what was happening, trying to understand how I could have felt so certain about him moments ago and now be flooded with nothing but terror. The wait was 45 minutes. 45 minutes where I sat in a car with armed guards and Luciano and his traumatized daughter, and I couldn't go back in, and I couldn't use the signal to reach Dante, and I could only sit in my own panic and wonder if I'd just made the worst mistake of my life by loving someone in a world where love was just another weapon. Then the door opened. Dante emerged from the building with 3 of his guards, and he was bleeding from a wound on his shoulder, and his suit was torn, and his face was covered in a splatter of what I hoped wasn't his own blood. But he was alive. He was moving. He was functional. The moment the car door closed, I pulled him toward me, checking the wound, needing to confirm that the damage was survivable. "Who was it?" I demanded. "Someone good," he said, breathing hard. "Someone who knows how to move like a ghost. Someone who can apparently use the gift as a weapon instead of just an insight. Someone—" He stopped, and I watched something register on his face, something that looked terrifyingly close to understanding. "Vittoria," he said slowly. "Was there anyone in your family besides your father who talked about bloodlines? About the marked? About what it meant?" "My grandmother," I said, the memory surfacing from places I'd forgotten it existed. "But she died when I was 7. She used to tell me stories about—" I stopped. "About what? About people who lived between worlds? About bloodlines that carried both curse and blessing? About a world underneath the world that most people never knew existed?" "Tell me about your grandmother," Dante said, and there was something in his voice that suggested he already knew the answer. "She had gray eyes," I whispered. "Like yours. She used to tell me that power ran in our blood, and that one day I'd meet someone with the same mark, and that when I did, everything would change." Dante looked away, and I saw his jaw clench. "Dante, what is it? Who was shooting at us?" He turned back to me, and his eyes were the most beautiful and terrifying things I'd ever seen. "I think it was your grandmother," he said quietly. "Or at least, someone who's supposed to be dead who apparently isn't. And if that's true, then nothing in your family's history was what they told you, and everything is about to become exponentially more complicated. But my grandmother is—" The car suddenly accelerated, swerving with violent intent, and I heard gunfire again, and I realized with a sinking clarity that this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. This was the moment where the past collided with the present, and the future became impossible to predict. Dante pulled me close, his body shielding mine, and I heard him whisper, "Hold on, Amore. We're about to find out if love is strong enough to survive the truth." We lost the car chasing us somewhere in the Port District and ended up in a safe house that Dante accessed by biometric scan, and a code I didn't catch because I was too focused on the wound on his shoulder that was bleeding through, his makeshift bandage. "Stop," he said as I reached for it. "The bleeding is slowing. I need you focused, not distracted." "I'm focused," I snapped. "I'm focused on the fact that someone who's supposed to be dead just tried to kill us, and you're acting like this is an inconvenience instead of a complete shattering of your entire understanding of reality. Because I live in a world where dead people coming back happens regularly," he said, sitting down and finally letting me help him remove his shirt. "Just not in ways that involve ghosts. This is someone with a body, someone with agency, Someone who's been planning something for a very long time. I cleaned the wound. It was deep but not catastrophic. The bullet having missed anything vital by millimeters, and wrapped it with bandages I found in the safe house's medical kit. "Tell me about your family," Dante said quietly. "Not what they told you. What do you remember from before you ran? What do you actually remember about your grandmother?" I sat back, and the memories surfaced, pieces of a puzzle I'd deliberately left incomplete. "She lived in the house, but separately," I said slowly. "In the eastern wing, which we weren't supposed to visit without permission. Sometimes I would sneak in, and she would teach me languages not from textbooks, but from ancient texts. She said that languages contained power, that they were the oldest magic, because they shaped how reality was perceived. What else? She told me that I was going to be special, that I carried something in my blood that my parents didn't understand, and that someday I would meet someone who understood it, and that person would be more dangerous to me than any gun or knife because they would make me want to risk everything." I looked at him, and my voice broke slightly. "She was talking about you, or someone like me," Dante said. "Your grandmother was connected to the marked in ways that your father kept hidden. She probably understood the twin mark better than anyone alive, which means she's been orchestrating this. You and me, the timing, the collision point. Why would she do that?" I asked. "Because the twin mark isn't just about love or power," he said, and his voice had changed, become something almost reverent. "It's about balance. When two marked bloodlines align, they don't just become stronger, they become something entirely new. They become capable of things that single-marked individuals can't achieve. They become bridges between the world of the normal and the world of the marked. They become," he paused, searching for the word, "necessary, crucial, essential to the survival of both worlds." He reached out and took my hand, pressing it against his chest, over his heart. "Your grandmother probably understood that you and I meeting wasn't fate. It was engineering. It was deliberate. And now, if she's really alive, she's probably here to either protect us or kill us, depending on whether we've aligned correctly." "How do we know if we've aligned correctly?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know that the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. And I know that bond feels true in a way that nothing else in my life has ever felt true. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe we align correctly by choosing each other despite all the reasons we shouldn't." He pulled me close, and I settled into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart, feeling the certainty that ran through him like a current. "We need to find your grandmother," he said into my hair. "Because if she's alive, and she's capable of what just happened, then she's the key to understanding what comes next. And whether that next thing is salvation or damnation depends entirely on what we're willing to sacrifice for each other." "I'm willing to sacrifice everything," I said, and I meant it so completely that it scared me. "I know," he said. "That's what terrifies me, because I'm willing to do the same thing, and that creates an equation where everyone else in the world becomes collateral damage." There was a knock on the door, 3 short, 1 long, then 2 short. A code of some kind. Dante tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the gun on the table beside us. "If I don't answer, they'll come in anyway," he said. "Are you ready?" "For what?" "To meet your family's past," he said quietly, and moved to the door. She was exactly as I remembered her, except older and harder, and there was something in her eyes that suggested she'd spent the years since I'd seen her learning how to be ruthless. "Vittoria," my grandmother said, and her voice was the voice from my childhood, soft but with an undertone of absolute authority. "You've made it further than I expected you would, farther than your parents would have allowed." "You tried to kill me," I said flatly. "I tried to test you," she corrected. "There's a difference. If I'd wanted you dead, you would be. The fact that you're still breathing is a testament to how well Dante can move when he's motivated, how well he can protect what he's claimed." She turned her attention to Dante, and I watched her assess him the way a general might assess a battlefield. "Dante Rossi," she said. "The twin mark acknowledges you. This is good. This is what we've been waiting for." "What have you been waiting for?" Dante demanded, his hand still on his gun. "For the bloodlines to align correctly," my grandmother said, moving further into the room with the kind of confidence that suggested she was very comfortable with the possibility of violence. "For someone like you to rise to power at the exact moment when someone like her came of age. For the convergence that happens once every 300 years or so, when the marked and the mortal worlds need someone to bridge the gap between them." She looked at me, and her eyes, my eyes, the gray eyes that Dante had softened just slightly. "I let you run, Piccola, because you needed to understand what the world outside looked like. You needed to know what freedom felt like before you chose to give it up. And you did choose, didn't you? You chose Dante over your own escape. I chose survival, I said. But we both knew that wasn't the whole truth. No, she said gently. You chose love, which is the same thing, in the end. Love is what makes survival bearable. She pulled something from her pocket, an old photograph, faded and worn. In it, two young people stood together, hand in hand, with the same impossible gray eyes that Dante and I shared. This is me and my twin Mark, my grandmother said. This was 1954. This was before the war, before the families fractured, before I made the choice to hide instead of fight. I regret that choice every single day. She handed me the photograph, and I could see it, the undeniable connection, the way they looked at each other like they were the only people in the world. Dante is your destiny, my grandmother said. But before you can claim that destiny, you need to understand what it costs. The twin mark isn't a gift, Vittoria. It's an obligation. You'll be responsible for thousands of people. You'll make decisions that will haunt you. You'll become the kind of power that everyone in the city will want to control or destroy. And what if I don't want that? I asked. Then you're weak, she said. And there was no cruelty in it, just truth. And weakness will get you killed. Dante stepped forward, positioning himself between me and my grandmother. With respect, Signora, Vittoria is already asking the right questions. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. My grandmother smiled, and it transformed her entire face. You love her, she observed. Completely, Dante said without hesitation. And you're willing to die for her. Without question. Good, my grandmother said. Then you're ready for what comes next. Because the families are gathering. They've sensed the twin mark's alignment, and they're coming to either welcome you or destroy you. We have 3 days to prepare you both for that choice. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Vittoria, she said, your parents loved you very much. In their way, they were trying to protect you. But they were wrong about what protection looks like. Protection isn't isolation. It's training. It's power. It's the knowledge that you're capable of surviving anything. That's what I'm going to teach you, both of you. Over the next 3 days, you're going to become something the city has never seen before. She left, and I was alone with Dante and the realization that love and war were about to become the same thing. Do you trust her? Dante asked. No, I said. But I trust that she won't lie about what's coming. And I trust that you'll keep me alive when she's done training us. He kissed me then, and it felt like a covenant. A promise written in the space between our bodies, in the place where my heartbeat aligned with his, in the moment where the mortal world and the marked world recognized each other and decided to become one. 3 days, he whispered against my lips. And then we show them exactly what they're afraid of. The gathering was held at the cathedral, not inside, but in the grounds beneath it, in the catacombs that no official maps acknowledged. Every family in the city was represented. The Corsinis, the Genoveses, the Romanellis, the Bartellis. 30 years of alliances and enmities, compressed into a room carved from stone and lit by candlelight that made everything feel like it existed outside time. My grandmother stood to one side, a figure of authority that transcended the family lines. Dante's uncle Salvatore stood to the other, representing the interests of the Rossi family, and in the center of the room stood me and Dante. The twin mark has manifested, my grandmother announced, her voice carrying through the stone chamber with preternatural clarity. For the first time in 300 years, the bloodlines have aligned. This means change is coming to this city, whether you accept it or not. It also means a threat. One of the older council members said I recognized him as the Corsini patriarch. The last time a twin mark existed, the balance of power shifted. Wars were fought. Families were destroyed. We have no guarantee that history won't repeat itself. You have my guarantee, my grandmother said coldly, and the guarantee of the marked bloodlines that back my word. If Dante and Vittoria become a threat to the peace of this city, they will be eliminated by the very bloodlines that fostered them. It was a brilliant move positioning my grandmother and her allies as custodians of the peace, rather than letting the fear drive a preemptive strike. We came here to accept a challenge, Dante said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. The twin mark requires testing. I'm ready to face any challenger. As am I said, and my voice was steady in a way that suggested someone much more confident than I felt. I'm ready to prove that the Moretti bloodline and the Rossi family are strong enough to manage this power. Silence. Then Salvatore stepped forward. I propose a trial, he said, ancient and traditional. The bloodlines choose a champion to represent their interests. The champion fights Dante and Vittoria as a unified pair. If they survive, the twin mark is accepted. If they fall, the families have the right to assume control of their power. It was a trap and an opportunity simultaneously. If we won, we established ourselves as formidable. If we lost, we were dead. I accept, Dante said, pulling me close. What are the rules? Combat, my grandmother said. No guns, no external support. Just the two of you, your bloodline gifts, and whatever your opponent can bring to bear. The champion emerged from the shadows. He was massive, at least 6'4", with the kind of controlled violence written into every line of his body that suggested he'd been trained since childhood. And then I saw his eyes. Gray. Like mine. Like Dante's. Like my grandmother's. This is Alexei, the Corsini patriarch said, and I heard the satisfaction in his voice. A marked bloodline we've been cultivating for 20 years. Stronger than any of you, faster than any of you, and absolutely loyal to our family. Dante's hand tightened in mine, and I could feel the shift as he accessed the gift that expanded awareness, that sharpening of senses that let him see 3 moves ahead. The battle began before anyone officially started it. Alexei moved with inhuman speed, and Dante pushed me behind him, his own gift translating into pure physical response. They collided in the center of the cathedral catacombs, and the sound was like thunder trapped in stone. I watched, using every ounce of my gift to track what was happening. The subtle shifts in weight, the micro-expressions that predicted the next move, the way Dante was bleeding from 100 small wounds while Alexei remained pristine. And then I understood. Alexei was stronger. Alexei was faster. But Dante was something else. Dante was fighting to win. Alexei was fighting to prove something. It was the difference between desperation and arrogance. I stepped forward, no longer behind Dante but beside him, and I opened myself to the gift completely. No filters, no protection, just the raw, unfiltered connection between me and everyone in this room. And I saw it all. Every secret, every alliance, every fear, every desire. The Corsini patriarch's concern that Alexei might actually be too dangerous. The way the other families were already planning how to contain us if we survived. The way my grandmother was ready to sever her own connections to them if they turned on us. Most importantly, I saw Alexei's weakness, a flaw in his bloodline that made him vulnerable to emotional manipulation. He needed to win to prove he was worthy. That need was his most lethal vulnerability. Alexei, I said, my voice quiet but absolute. You're already dying. He stumbled, distracted, and Dante took advantage, moving with precision that was born from understanding exactly where his opponent would be. The fight ended with Alexei on his knees, gasping, and Dante standing over him with the kind of mercy that suggested he understood that sometimes you had to show your strength by not delivering the killing blow. I could end you, Dante said quietly. And everyone in this room knows it. But I won't. Because I'm not fighting for pride or legacy. I'm fighting because I have something worth protecting. And that's a motivation that your kind of strength can never match. He turned away from Alexei, walked back to me, and took my hand in full view of every family representative in the room. The twin mark is acknowledged, my grandmother announced. The trial is complete. The families are bound to respect the new order. There were murmurs of dissent, but no one moved. The Corsini patriarch looked furious, but he didn't challenge the decision. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone could feel it. As we left the catacombs, climbing back toward the surface world, I heard my grandmother speak quietly to Dante. This is only the beginning, she said. You understand that, don't you? The real battles are going to be fought in boardrooms and blackmail networks. This was just the theatrical prelude. I know, Dante said. But at least now everyone knows we're strong enough to survive the war they're about to wage. We emerged into the night air, and the city spread out below us like a map of our future. Dangerous, beautiful, ours. 6 months later, the penthouse had been transformed. The study where Dante had first shown me the journals now contained additions, my own notes, my own research, my own discoveries about bloodlines and power and the strange intersection between the mortal world and the marked. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun set over the city, and I could feel him before he appeared, that shift in the air that suggested Dante had entered the room. Your translation network has tripled in size, he said, moving to stand beside me. The legitimate business side alone could sustain us now. The legitimate side was always going to sustain us, I said. I just wanted to prove that we could build something that didn't require violence as its foundation. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me from behind, and I leaned back into the warmth of his body. Your family is getting more cooperative, I continued. Since my grandmother started mentoring your uncle on marked bloodline politics, there's been a shift. Less open aggression, More strategic alignment. Your grandmother is terrifying, Dante said. And there was something like pride in his voice. But also brilliant. She's fundamentally restructured how the families operate. We're not at war anymore, amore. We're something more like a federation. We're not done, I said. The Corsinis are still hostile. The Genoveses are still looking for opportunities to undermine us. There are probably 3 other families I don't even know about yet who are planning something. I know, Dante said. But we're together. And together, we've already proven that we're strong enough to survive anything they bring. My phone buzzed. A message in Italian from my grandmother. The council meets at midnight. They want your assessment of the port negotiations. I was part of the inner council now. Officially. It was wild that 3 months ago, I'd been translating documents in basements for cash, and now I was making decisions that affected thousands of people. You have to go, Dante said, reading my message before I had a chance to move. Come with me, always, he said, and he meant it in that absolute way that suggested the kind of devotion that could move mountains or burn cities. We moved through the penthouse together, and I was struck once again by how natural this had become. The way he moved through the world now that he wasn't alone. The way I'd learned to translate not just languages but the unspoken grammar of power. My grandmother was waiting in the council chamber when we arrived. She looked at us at how we moved together, at how our energies had begun to synchronize in ways that suggested the gift was deepening our connection. You're both changing, she observed. The twin mark is doing something unexpected. The boundary between your individual gifts is becoming less clear. Soon you might not be able to tell where one ends and the other begins. Is that dangerous? I asked. It's evolution, she said. And evolution is always dangerous. But it's also necessary. She pulled out a file, the same kind of file that had started this entire adventure, months ago. There's something you need to know, she said quietly. The marked bloodlines aren't just present in this city, they're everywhere. And something is happening. Something that's causing them to wake up simultaneously. Something that's drawing them toward a single point. Toward us? Dante asked. Toward the twin mark, my grandmother corrected. And specifically, toward what you're going to become if you continue to align as you have been. The answer to something that's been asleep for longer than any of us have been alive. She opened the file, and I saw photographs of other people with gray eyes. People scattered across the world. Moscow, Tokyo, New York, Sao Paulo. Other twin marks. Other bloodlines. Other pairs of people who'd found each other in the darkness. They're starting to communicate, my grandmother said. They're starting to understand that the marked aren't meant to be isolated within family territories. They're meant to be part of something larger, something older, something that the modern world has completely forgotten about. A network, I said, understanding beginning to dawn. A revolution, my grandmother corrected. And you two are going to be the architects of it. I looked at Dante, and I saw the same mixture of exhilaration and terror in his face that I knew was in mine. We have barely mastered this city, Dante said. Which is why you're perfect for what comes next, my grandmother said. You've learned to build alliances instead of just amassing power. You've learned to balance ruthlessness with mercy. You've learned that love is not weakness. Those are the exact qualities the marked need right now. She closed the file and stood. Rest tonight, she said. Because tomorrow the next phase of your life begins, and it will make everything you've survived so far look like preparation. After she left, Dante pulled me close in the empty council chamber. I have something for you, he said, and he pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Inside was a ring silver, with a single gray stone that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Is this, I started to ask. A promise, he said. To love you, to fight beside you, to build something that changes the world, if you want it. I didn't answer with words. I answered by sliding the ring onto my finger and kissing him in a way that suggested all the answers I would ever need to give. Outside, the city sprawled beneath us, dangerous, beautiful, and ours. And somewhere in the darkness, other gray eyes were opening. Other twin marks were recognizing their counterparts, and the ancient bloodlines were beginning to wake from their long sleep. The best part? I wasn't afraid anymore. Dante and I had survived the dark. We'd learned to love in the presence of violence. We'd built something real in a world made of smoke and shadows. And now we were going to show the entire world what two people bound by bloodline, fate, and absolute devotion could actually achieve.